Hey everyone, welcome back to RetroBreak. In today's video, I'm very excited because I'm going to be sharing with you my journey through game collecting over the past 20 plus years at this point, as well as some recommendations for you and kind of how I've come to these conclusions over time. So we'll start off with buying games and how my buying habits have changed over time and some recommendations for you these days. We'll then take a look at tracking your game collection, and I can talk about how I came to the conclusions on the website that I use today for tracking my games and how it kind of started just on pen and paper and everything in between. And then the final part is actually discovering the games. So how do you find out which games are worth collecting in the first place? And I've got some great recommendations for you on that topic as well. So let's get started straight away with the first part, which is buying games. I've been doing this for 20 years or thereabouts, and in the past 10 years or so, every single year I get loads of comments on my videos. I see loads of people on Twitter, on Facebook, on Reddit, wherever, just complaining that it's no fun to buy retro games anymore. Everything's way too expensive, all the good games have already gone to collectors and there's nothing left for you. People are overreacting. They always have been, and they always will be. Let me explain. If you're going into a hobby, which is collecting things in general that are decades old at this point, there's always going to be a small section of that hobby that becomes expensive over time, and it's always been the case. I think back 10, 15 years ago, and even back then, there were plenty of games that were way outside most people's budgets, and those games have held or increased their value. But as well as that, there's always been an underlying range of not lesser quality titles, but either titles that were just available in much larger quantities, which have managed to hold their sort of lower value, and also just popular games in general, which have kind of just leveled out at a certain point and never really risen above that. For the majority of the games, for the more popular series, they're really not any more expensive than they were back then, like if you take inflation into account at least. So I think it's completely overblown that people are upset about the prices of retro games. Sure, there are some exceptions, and some games have actually gone up a lot more than others. You can obviously look at things like price charting, and the pandemic didn't help, but since that original spike in like 2019, 2020, things have started to level back out again. But anyway, I thought I could spend a little bit of time going through kind of the changes that I've made in my buying habits over the years, and sort of where I get the majority of my games today, because I'm sure if you look around my room, if you watched my game room tours, you're probably wondering where I actually buy most of these games. Well, back in the day, back in the good old days, you know, when Game Station and Game Zone were still around, yes, if you're from the UK, you know it would start with this. We had some incredible game shops that specialised in selling retro games, and Game Station was one of them. You could get basically any popular game just dirt cheap for any of the retro systems, and they had an offer as well. It was called Bog Off, buy one get one free, and that just fueled my collecting habits all throughout school and college. And then at the end of college, Game Station closed down, and a lot of those games just kind of disappeared into the ether. And I got very, very upset at the time. I actually wrote an email to the headquarters of Game Station telling them how stupid they were, basically. Because I'd read some rumours online. Well, I don't know whether they were rumours, let me know in the comments below. But I'd read that they were sending the unsold games to landfill, and I was just so furious. I just wrote this massive long email to them, and obviously they never replied, probably because the company didn't exist anymore. But yeah, that was just a very, very disheartening moment for me. There was another game shop that also kind of folded around the same time called Game Zone as well, and these were more of an independent shop. They were scattered around the UK. There was like 3 within my area here in the Midlands that I would go to frequently. I was friends with the owners from all of them, and those shops were just incredible as well. There was a great one in the shopping centre near where I went to college, so after college I would some days walk over into the shopping centre and pick a game up from Game Zone and then read the manual on the bus on the way home, and it was just a great time. But unfortunately both of those shops are no longer around anymore. The only true sort of retro gaming shop that we've got these days is CEX here in the UK, and I think it's in a few other countries as well. I see a lot of complaints online about CEX as well, but honestly, from the prices that I've seen for the majority of their retro games, it kind of goes back to what I was saying at the start of this video. Obviously, there are some games that are expensive, and some people look at those games and they don't realise the quantity of games that are affordable, and they just see these outliers like Rule of Rose for the PS2 that's like 400 and something pound, and they go, oh my god, game collecting's gone insane, you'll never be able to buy any more games ever again. It's really not the case. Have a look on CEX's website or have a look on their app. They are very, very reasonable with their prices, and I've got some incredible deals from them as well. Just the other day I got I'll find it for you actually. Bubble Bobble on the Sega Master System here, and I've got the receipt right here. You'd think Bubble Bobble would be a fairly expensive game these days because, you know, it's kind of a sought after title. It's been featured on a lot of like top games lists here on YouTube and stuff. I got it for £28, which I think is very, very reasonable for a retro game of that caliber. So it is still affordable, it really is, and I've got so many great games. If you take a look at some of my pickups videos, I always shout out where I got them from, and although I don't really say the prices because I don't want it to be about price, basically I can say that I've been happy with every purchase that I've had from there. Obviously, else I wouldn't have bought them in the first place. There's certainly more expensive options out there. Of course, another great avenue for buying retro games is of course the internet, and I grew up with eBay. I've had an account since 2002, and I bought loads of games on there over the years. Unfortunately, back in the day I did also sell a bunch of games as well, which I really regret these days because I don't like getting rid of my games just in case I want to play them again in the future. Luckily they weren't games of any real value and I've got them all back now. But anyway, I was just looking at my collection and I actually found the first ever game that I bought myself on my own account on eBay. It was this game right here, thanks to my recommendation from my friend Jack, who's been on the channel a few times in the past. This game Vex right here I remember getting on eBay, and I was very excited to see it turn up in the post, and that just clicked in my brain and sparked an addiction of just buying whatever games I felt like off the internet. And they were dirt cheap at the time, like around 2004, 5, 6. No one really wanted second-hand GameCube games, so I was just buying them up in like bundles of like 10 games in one go and getting them all delivered and opening them up here on YouTube actually, and the same with the PS2. So if you go back and watch some of my very, very early videos, you'll see boxes full of stuff that I picked up off eBay. And even today, eBay is still a great avenue for buying retro games. The bidding side of things has kind of died down a little bit on eBay, I feel, and a lot more stuff is going towards buy it now. And obviously people know what the games are worth, so you're not going to get the crazy deals where you just get a bunch of games that no one's really bothered to look through. Games will actually have their proper values associated with them, which is kind of a bummer, but also kind of expected at this point in time with the maturity of the market and things like that. But yeah, definitely still recommend eBay. A more modern recommendation for online shopping though is an app. I don't know whether it actually has a website, I've only ever used the app, and it's called Vinted. And me and my fiance now, we're actually looking on Vinted for a game that we wanted to play together because we had a look at our box and the disc was missing, and since we've moved house we didn't know where the disc was. So we had a look on eBay for the game. It was Twilight Princess for the Wii U. It was like 70, 80 quid on eBay, and it was roughly the same on CEX, maybe 60, 70. And we found it on Vinted for 50. And so we put an order in. We got it delivered to one of those locker storage things in Tesco. And we went to pick it up, and it was perfectly fine, perfectly smooth experience. And yeah, it seems like a really great alternative to using something like eBay. It was very straightforward and easy to use. And I know there's a bunch of other new apps that have kind of come around recently, and obviously Facebook Marketplace as well is a more recent evolution of this sort of online shopping experience. And I got a really great deal on Facebook Marketplace a few years ago where, and this is actually quite rare these days, someone didn't know what they were selling. They were basically selling a box. It was like a big blue Lego brick full of loose Game Boy Advance games, and I got the whole lot for about 20 quid, and there were some great games inside there. I'll see whether I can find the video where I actually showed all this off and put a little bit over here for you. You guys might know, if you use Facebook, that there's a thing called Facebook Marketplace that's just sort of become popular. It's about 30 games in here, and the amazing thing is they were only asking 30 quid for the whole lot. And like I mentioned, CEX on the high street, they actually have an app and a website as well. And honestly, not only is this great for buying the games, it can get kind of expensive because you have to pay separate postage for each game. They don't actually bundle everything together, which is kind of frustrating. But the main reason I enjoy using CEX is to do it as kind of a price comparison, because they do price the games quite well, I find. So if you look on there and you see the price, you can kind of have that as a rough estimate of what you should expect to pay for the game. So anytime I'm building up a wish list, I'll have a look on CEX and write down the price that I'm just expecting to see. And then whenever I find it cheaper than that, then I know I've got a good deal and I'm always really excited. So that is a great way of using that. I also love using the CEX app and website for just looking at the entire library of games for a system, because they have everything listed and you can go through alphabetical order, and they have a picture of the box as well, so you can just scroll through it. And I just enjoy this when I've got some free time. I just scroll through an entire systems library and just write down any games that look interesting. So that's one way of actually discovering some games, which I'll cover a bit later on. But more recently, other ways that I've been buying games include going to different gaming conventions, like all of the different gaming markets that are on around the country. I've been going to those religiously since about 2017 now, and I always have a fantastic time there. Obviously, you don't go there expecting to get a bargain. You go there to look at the array of games that are available, and you have a fixed budget, or I do at least. I know some people just go completely insane at those events, but I usually take £200-300 or whatever and just know that that's how much I'm going to spend going into it, and just really enjoy digging into all of the bins full of games and looking across all the tables, and also meeting up with friends and fellow content creators and getting to meet some of you people that actually watch the channel as well. It's just been so much fun going to these events all across the UK for the past few years, and I can't wait to go to more in the future as well. They are a great way of finding out about games that you probably wouldn't have thought about searching for online as well. I've actually picked up a load of games from the gaming markets that just would have not even entered my mind. And some of them I pick up just completely on a whim because I like the idea of the cover, or from a recommendation from a friend that I meet at the show as well. So it's always great to go out there in person and enjoy just exploring the range of games that are available for all of these different systems too. And going back to the topic of GameStation and GameZone folding, there has been a big rise in independent game shops, and I'm just so happy that they're still around and they seem to be thriving as well. There's a bunch in my local area, and there's so many more around the country that I want to go and visit. I know times have been tough and some of them have closed down, but the ones that are holding on really do seem to be doing very well, and please go ahead and check them out. A viewer of this channel actually emailed me a website that they've been building where you can actually use this interactive map of the UK to find out where the independent game shops are, and I'll definitely be using this in the future, so I'll put a link in the description if you want to check it out. I think it's a fantastic resource. For the second part here, we're going to be talking about how I track my game collection and some suggestions for you too. So I'm sure, just like a lot of people, I actually started out just writing down the games that I already owned on a piece of paper just to keep track of the various different systems. I actually remember taking this to school and trying to like show off to people like, who cares whether the PS3 is coming out? Look at all these cool SNES games that I've got, and I would have a list in a little notebook. Obviously things progressed from there, and the second way that I used for tracking my games was an Excel file, and I used this all the way up until first year of college, and I actually found that file, and I remember that file very, very well because I would update it all the time. Like I said, when I was in college and I went to these various different game shops, on the bus on the way home I would get out my laptop and I would update the Excel file with my most recent purchases, and using that file was actually how I found out that I finally crossed the 1000 games threshold way back in 2008, I think. And that game number 1000, was Bomberman Generation for the GameCube, and I'll always remember that one. Yes, it's not really a very special game, and I probably should have picked something a little bit more exciting for such a great milestone, but even so, it's something that will always stick in my mind. So it was really cool to actually see this Excel file again. But then, after I found out that there were some websites online that allowed you to track your collection that way, I kind of ditched the Excel file and literally spent a few days of work going through my entire game collection and uploading it all onto a website called Playfire. And I'm sure if some of you were around on the internet back then, you might remember Playfire. It was a really cool website, I thought. I thought it was fantastic. It was basically like if you remember how iPads used to look from iOS 6, when you would go into the Books app and it would display the books on the shelf with this like wood panel background, just like one of the IKEA shelves behind me, it would actually display the books going across like that. The website was just like that. You would add your game and it would pick out the cover for the game and put it onto a shelf so you could actually scroll through and physically see which games you had for the various different systems. So I loved that aesthetic of it. And there was another thing that I really loved about that website that no other website, as far as I know, has really tried to replicate since then, and that was the fact that each game you could also accompany with a post, like a blog post or a review about that game. And if you have a look at my website and you go right back to some of the earliest posts on there, they're actually posts that I took off Playfire when that site went down and then published them on the website instead. And it also had great community features as well, so I was so sad in around 2011, I think, when that site was shut down and Playfire became a part of something called Green Man Gaming, which was like some Xbox add-on that could see what games you were playing on Xbox with your friends and things, and I just was not interested in the slightest. I was very, very upset. And then I spent a bit of time trying to look for alternatives, and there are some great alternatives out there. The first one that I went to after Playfire went down was a website called RetroBreak, and I started moving all my stuff over to there, but I wasn't really feeling the UI. I didn't really feel like it worked that well from what I wanted for a website like that. I know some people still use it, it's still around out there online. I also tried Game FAQs with their game tracking feature on there as well, but again, something just didn't click with me, and it wasn't until about a year later that I discovered a website called Backloggery, and that one finally clicked with me. It had all of the community features that I loved of Playfire. It didn't have the database built into the back end, which I still feel is something that's sorely missing from that website today. But in terms of the usability and the various different bits of metadata that you could attach to the games that you owned, there really was no comparison in my eyes. That was the way forward. And since then, for the past, 12, 13 years at this point, I've been using Playfire pretty much. I called it Playfire, I meant Backloggery. I do miss Playfire, I really do. I've actually been using Backloggery for a long time now. I basically go on there at least once a week, and I have done for the past 13 or so years at this point, and it's been a fantastic way for just easily adding whatever new games I get, for adding things to the wish list that's on there as well. In fact, whenever I'm at a game shop or something, I'll pull up the wish list on Backloggery to see if any of the games are in the shop, and the same when I'm at the gaming conventions too. And I also made a few friends through Backloggery as well, thanks to the different community features on there, like being able to write on other people's walls and check their gameplay in progress and stats and tracking habits and things. And it was such a fantastic website, and unfortunately there's been an update in the past few months. Actually, it's a fairly recent update, and it's kind of pushed a lot of that community aspect to the side in favour of having a more straightforward UI for your personal page. And I really love that, but the fact that they kind of ruined some of the multi-tap feature aspects kind of ruined the site for me personally in some ways as well, because I loved going on there and just seeing a quick rundown of everyone's game collections and their most recently played games and stuff. You can sort of still see that, but it's all hidden away on a different tab and everything's all bundled together in one big list. But I am on the Patreon, and I have suggested that they restore some of that community aspect, so hopefully the site improves in the future. And there are a bunch of other alternatives out there which are probably worth looking at as well. There's a very similar website that also has a very similar name called Backlogged instead of Backloggery, and I know the two can get a little bit mixed up sometimes, so maybe check that one out if you want something with a bit more of a database in the background. And I also know that a lot of people use one called Game Eye as well, which I think is an iOS and Android app, which is great for mobile use. So that's sort of my journey through my tracking of games, and I've basically settled into Backloggery. So if you want to follow me on Backloggery and check out my game collecting and playing progress, then type in the URL up there or check the link in the description. And now for the third section of the video, which is how to discover the games that you want to buy and collect and play in the first place. And all of these are actually things that I've done over the years, and I still do to this day. So unlike the other ones, it's not like something's come along and replaced those existing things. These have all actually come together to form a really robust system for me to find out about games to play across every single platform. So I'm going to start off with the first way that I used to do this, So I was a massive fan back in the day of gaming magazines, and I amassed an insane collection. There was a video that I did in 2009 where I laid them out across the floor, and the entire of the upstairs of the house was full of magazines. I just loved... Before the internet came along and ruined my attention span, just like everyone else, I loved sitting down every single night. I would go upstairs and sit down every single night. I would have a bowl of cereal, I would have a glass of water, and I would have a gaming magazine, and I would just sit there in bed flicking through the pages of the magazines. And the way that I found out about a lot of games, like here's an example of one that I had in the room right now. This is Superplay, one of my favourite magazines from the UK. Most of the magazines, the ones for specific systems anyway, always had a section in the back like this, which would basically be a database of all the reviews that they'd ever done for that system. So I would love looking at some of the later issues of magazines from retro systems, or systems, you know, where the magazines had run their course. And I would look through here and note down all the games that got good scores. And usually the good games would have a screenshot to accompany them, and also a rating and a bit of a description about the game as well. So this is definitely still to this day one of the best ways of finding out about games that you might be interested in. And of course, you don't have to go and collect the original magazines like I do. These days you can download the PDFs, and I'll show you what I do these days. These days, what I really like to do, and it's kind of an evolution of what I used to do in the past, I'll sit in bed with my iPad mini and read the gaming magazines that I've actually downloaded off the internet onto here, and some of the scans are really incredible. It literally looks as good as just reading the official thing, except you can store hundreds of them on here rather than having to have like a whole garage full of magazines, which is what I've got at the minute. So, for example, here's one of my favourite magazines from back in the day. This is GBX, a Game Boy Advance magazine, and I'll just sit in bed and scroll through the pages here and read some of the reviews. And for the games that I like the look of, I've got a note in my Apple Notes where I'll write down the name of the game, and then I can just, you know, look for that next time I'm out shopping anywhere. And again, like I was saying, at the end of these magazines, they would always have these sort of directory sections where you've got a list of all the games they've reviewed along with all the scores they've given them as well. And this one also has some for the Game Boy Color too. So this has been a fantastic resource. It always has been. It always will be. The internet is no replacement, and I am very sad that gaming magazines are nowhere near as prevalent as they are these days. In fact, Game Informer recently shut down after 33 years of being on the market, which is incredibly sad. There's a few good ones still around in the UK, including obviously Retro Gamer, which I've actually been subscribed to since about 2005 or 6, which is just insane. So I have hundreds and hundreds of copies of that magazine, and I still really enjoy reading it every single month when it comes through the post. But as well as magazines, there is something new that's come onto the scene, especially in the past 10 years. Things have really picked up in this regard, and that is books dedicated to specific systems or specific developers. Some of them that I really love, and you can check my channel for this, and I've got loads of book recommendations on the channel. I love these style of books here, these anthology ones, and Geeks Line definitely makes the best ones that I've found. So not only do you get really in-depth information about the systems, but you actually get, just like I loved about the gaming magazines, really in-depth reviews. You get scores, you get screenshots for every single game in a systems library, and these ones in particular, they give it a rating, they tell me which games are worth playing. Some of the more important games will get like multiple page spreads. It just really is a fantastic resource, and it's so much nicer looking at this kind of thing in a book where you can just quickly flick through the pages and see everything rather than going to a website and kind of knowing what you're looking for in advance or having to scroll through different pages. There's no adverts that get in the way. You know, it's just nice to sit down and disconnect and read through these. And these ones even have like summary pages like this, where if you really wanted to go in depth, you can even tick off which games you've collected from these as well. So absolutely amazing. Really, really love these. And in terms of websites, there is 2 websites, actually. I was going to say 1, but there's actually 2 that I would very highly recommend. The first one is Hardcore Gaming 101, and this has been a website that I've frequented over the past 20 years, and it still stands as by far the best resource for more interesting and obscure games. And it's just a fantastic website for finding out about various different games and series. And then at the bottom of the page, you get recommended games. And I just love that site so much. You can go down the rabbit hole and spend years of your life looking through all of the different articles on here and never get bored. So my highest recommendation goes to Hardcore Gaming 101. There's also another fantastic site for finding out about some of the best games, the cheapest games, the most expensive, kind of different categories like that, like hidden gems. This is basically where I discovered the concept of hidden gems, was this website called Racket Boy. So take both of these websites and you've pretty much got every single good game that you could ever want to know about for basically every retro system. And then of course there's where you are right now, YouTube as well, and obviously there's loads of great videos out there, like the hidden gems for the systems, like developer retrospectives, and of course with YouTube you also get people's personal opinions and why the games mean so much to them as well, and then it might be more interesting for you to pick up a game because you've heard someone's memories about them as well, and you can kind of connect them together when you're playing. So definitely recommend YouTube as a great resource as well. But honestly, my favourite thing these days, and potentially forever into the future, is books and magazines. There definitely is still a place for them outside of the internet, so definitely track some of them down. And like I said, you don't even need to get the physical books, you can just get the PDFs and put them on an iPad or a Kindle or something and enjoy them that way too. Let me know down in the comments below what are some tips that you'd like to give to people watching this video. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I'll definitely be doing more of these style of videos in the future too. Goodbye.